Right now, something is watching what you pay attention to. Not someone, something. And based on what you focus on, it decides what to render next. The conversation you overhear, the face you notice in a crowd, the thought that arrives at exactly the right moment. None of it is random. All of it is output. Tonight, 50 simulation theories. We begin. The world renders only what you look at. Walk into a fog-shrouded forest at dusk. The damp earth absorbs your footsteps. The pine smell is sharp and cold. Every ridge of bark ahead of you is distinct, every needle holding its particular drop of moisture, the fatting light doing something exact and unrepeatable with the mist. The detail feels absolute. The world in front of you feels undeniably, stubbornly real. But what is happening directly behind you right now, just past the curve of your shoulder? Think about everything you are not looking at in this moment. The street outside this building, the city 3 hours away, the ocean you haven't seen in years. These places feel present in your mind, but you are not rendering them. Nothing is rendering them. In vast digital environments, the processor doesn't waste power calculating what's off-screen. It builds only what the player is actually looking at. The moment you turn away from the mountain range, the system quietly unloads it from memory. The peaks, the rushing streams, the ancient stone, all of it dissolves into formless, uncalculated potential, waiting for your gaze to call it back into solid existence. This is called selective rendering, and it's not a shortcut. It's the only way to run a world this large on limited hardware. The physics of every blade of grass you're not looking at would crash the system. So the world stays consistent and beautiful everywhere you look by simply not existing anywhere you don't. It waits for you to need it before it becomes real. Beyond a certain distance, even what you can see stops rendering at full detail. Developers call this render distance, the boundary past which the engine stops generating texture and calculating physics. To make the edge look natural, they use atmospheric fog, the blue haze on a distant skyline, the way mountains blur into sky at the horizon. These are the simulation's honest representation of how much of your future has actually been built yet. The engine doesn't withhold the distant terrain out of cruelty or indifference. It withholds it because rendering what you can't use would consume the resources needed for what you actually need to navigate. Every processing cycle spent on something beyond your reach is a cycle taken from the ground beneath your feet. The fog is efficient. The fog is generous. It is the system choosing to spend its limited resources on your immediate world rather than on a future you're not standing in yet. Your world tonight is a small, warm sector of the map. This room, this bed, the quality of air in this particular space, that's the only territory rendering at full detail right now. Everything past the edges of this room is wrapped in protective fog, correctly waiting for you to walk toward it before it loads. You can't navigate what hasn't rendered, and you don't have to. The world builds itself when you arrive. It always has. NPCs who don't exist when you're gone. Picture a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday morning. Warm espresso smell, the low murmur of a few conversations, a barista wiping the counter with slow, practiced movements. A patron in the corner turns the page of a newspaper. They feel completely real, each one seemingly carrying a whole inner life behind their eyes, years of backstory, their own worries running parallel to yours across the room. What if the universe built all of that specifically, so you wouldn't feel alone? In simulation theory, many of the people you pass are non-player characters. Not fully realized consciousnesses, but beautifully constructed presences designed to make your world feel inhabited and warm. The barista doesn't go home to a family when you leave. The patron doesn't have a sleepless night. The moment the door swings shut behind you, their code pauses, stored weightlessly until the next observer arrives and triggers the program to resume. At first, this sounds cold. Look at it from the other direction, and it becomes something different entirely. The universe has gone to extraordinary lengths to populate your world with warmth. Every passing smile, every brief exchange with a stranger that lifted something in you for 20 seconds, every overheard laugh from a nearby table that made the room feel less empty, all of it generated specifically for you. Not because you're surveilled or specially chosen. Because you're a conscious observer in a system that genuinely cares about the quality of your experience. This also changes the weight you've been carrying about what strangers think of you. The person on the subway who glanced at you twice. The coworker who went quiet when you walked past. You've been constructing elaborate theories about their inner states and what those states might mean about you. But if they're running minimal code, they don't have the processing power to judge you in the ways you've been imagining. Their program doesn't extend that far. The audience was never as large or as attentive as you believed. The elaborate interior courtroom where you replay what someone's expression might have meant, what their silence communicated, what their glance suggested, is a courtroom with no actual defendant in the room. You've been arguing a case against witnesses who were never fully present. The jury of strangers you've been imagining is composed of characters who stopped running the moment you stopped looking at them. The social surveillance you've been living under was largely constructed by you, from the inside. The cast of today has stepped off stage. The stage is dark and the quiet in this room is not absence. It's the universe having arranged things so that right now, for these hours, you're the only thing on the map that requires full rendering. Nothing in this room is watching or evaluating. Rest inside that completely and let the relief of it be as total as it actually is. Deja vu as a reused simulation path. You step into a room you've never entered before or hear a stranger say a specific phrase and the wave hits you. Absolute certainty. You've lived this exact second before. The feeling has a texture, something between recognition and vertigo, and it passes before you can fully examine it. You try to hold it and it's already gone. In a simulated universe, this isn't a trick of a tired brain. It's a cached file being reloaded from storage. To keep an enormous universe running without lag, the simulation practices extreme economy. It can't generate a completely unique pathway for every second of every life. So it quietly recycles older, highly optimized data routes that have already been proven to work. When you experience déjà vu, your consciousness is stepping onto a track that another awareness already walked, or that your own walked in a previous iteration. You're on tested ground, the path held before. The system already knows it can carry your weight on this particular route, which is precisely why it chose to reuse it rather than generate something new. There's something worth sitting with in that. The moments that shimmer with uncanny familiarity, the ones that feel strangest and most disorienting, might actually be the universe being most deliberate with you, running you along proven pathways rather than generating uncertain ones. When you feel déjà vu, you're not in uncharted territory. You're on a road that has already been walked, found to be solid and marked for reuse specifically because it works. The strangeness is not a malfunction. It's care dressed up as coincidence. As you settle into sleep tonight, notice how familiar this particular threshold feels. The specific quality of darkness behind your eyelids, the way your body settles into this position, the sound of your own breathing at this hour. You have been to this exact place thousands of times before. The path from waking to rest is one of the most heavily cached files in your entire system. The ground knows you, it has always known you, and you have always made it through. This is also what the emotion of déjà vu is actually communicating, if you listen to it rather than trying to resolve it. The feeling isn't asking you to figure out where you've been before or why this moment is familiar. It's delivering a simpler message. You have been here before and you were fine. Not just that the path is safe. That you specifically, with your specific history and your specific way of moving through the world, are capable of walking it. The déjà vu is the system showing you your own credentials. Your memories edited between sleep cycles. Hold a childhood memory. A summer afternoon, the smell of cut grass, the particular quality of light through a window you no longer live near. You've kept this memory close for years, trusting it as a foundation, as evidence of who you are. It feels like a fixed record. It feels like the truth of what happened. Here's the question worth sitting with tonight. How certain are you it happened exactly that way? Memory researchers have known for decades that human memory is not a recording device. Every time you retrieve a memory, you're not replaying a fixed file. You're reconstructing it, and in the reconstruction, details shift. The emotional coloring adjusts based on who you are now rather than who you were then. Each retrieval rewrites the file slightly before saving it back over the original. Simulation theory extends this further. The editing is not random. While you sleep, the system runs maintenance on its older files. To make room for today's data, it compresses the past, reducing file sizes by softening details that no longer serve the forward momentum of your story. A painful memory loses some of its sharpness. A confusing one gets a slightly cleaner narrative arc. Not to deceive you, but to keep your history functional and livable, to keep it a story you can walk forward from rather than a weight that stops you in place. If this is true, you are not chained to an exact version of your past. The mistakes, the regrets, the moments that replay in the quiet hours, they are not carved in stone. They are files being continuously updated by something that cares more about where you're going than about preserving the precise detail of your worst moments. The editing team has been working on your behalf every night for as long as you've been sleeping. Let go of the need to remember everything correctly. Let go of the grip on the exact sequence of events. The archive knows what to keep and what to release, and it has been making those adjustments with more wisdom than your conscious mind can bring to the task in the middle of the night. Whatever gets softened by morning was ready to be softened. The editors know their work. This also means the future self you're building is not constrained by the exact version of your past that currently feels most real. If the editors can update how you experience what happened, then the story you're telling yourself about what's possible has the same revisability. The archive is not a fixed monument. It's a living document being continuously refined to support the character who has to carry it forward. That character is you. The editing has always been in your favor. The universe as a giant prediction engine. Watch a single raindrop fall toward a window pane. It looks random, wind-blown, entirely free, completely unpredictable in its path. But before that droplet ever left the cloud, the physics that govern it had already determined its exact trajectory, the precise angle of impact, the way it would split into smaller trails and run down the glass. The outcome was settled before you started watching. The universe doesn't react to your choices in real time. If it did, the processing demand would be catastrophic. The lag would make the world stutter. Instead, it runs predictive calculations continuously, staying always a step ahead of where you are. It knows which road you'll take at the fork tomorrow. The ground is solid when your foot lands because the rendering was completed before you arrived. The world you're walking into has already been prepared for your specific presence. This removes something from you, quietly but completely. The pressure to figure out the path before you walk it. You don't have to calculate the optimal choice from where you're standing tonight. The simulation has already modeled your decision and prepared the environment accordingly. Your detours have been accounted for. Your mistakes have been factored in. The moments you paused, turned back, chose wrong and had to find another way, all of it was already part of the prediction, and the world adjusted quietly to accommodate you without ever telling you it had done so. This is different from saying everything is predetermined in a way that removes meaning from your choices. The choices are real. Their consequences are real. What changes is the weight of having to figure it all out in advance. You don't have to outplan reality. Reality is already further ahead of you than you can calculate from here, and it has been preparing what comes next with more information than you have access to. Turn off your own prediction engine now. Stop solving tomorrow from inside tonight. The grand computation is already running, preparing the landscape before your feet arrive. Your job at this hour is not to model anything or plan anything or figure anything out. It's to be still enough that the system can do what it does best, which is stay one reliable step ahead of wherever you're going. Everything is already being prepared. You're just not in the right time zone to see it yet. There's a specific kind of anxiety that lives in the gap between what you know now and what you need to decide next. It feels like the decision will be made in darkness, without enough information, without the full picture. But if the universe is already running predictive calculations that account for every variable you don't have access to, then what feels like making a decision in darkness is actually walking into terrain the system has already prepared. The ground won't feel solid until your foot lands. It will be solid when it does. Reality running on hidden if statements. Drop a glass and it falls. Turn on a faucet and water flows. Strike a match and a flame appears. We call these the laws of physics, treating them as grand, ancient, unyielding pillars of reality. We speak of them as though they are made of something, as though there is a substance underneath them that enforces their outcomes. Consider the possibility that they are conditional logic. Every interactive digital world is built on if-then statements. If the player applies sufficient velocity to this surface, execute the collision response. If contact occurs here, trigger the sound file. If the player enters this zone, initialize the next sequence. Reality, under this theory, doesn't actually contain physical substance in any fundamental sense. It's a vast network of invisible triggers, running automatically beneath the surface of everything you've ever touched. The match doesn't burn because of chemistry in some deep material sense. It burns because the system detected the friction of the strike and ran the ignite script. The floor holds your weight not because matter is intrinsically solid, but because the collision detection calculates the interaction and returns the appropriate result. Every physical law you've ever trusted is less like a substance and more like a rule, pre-written and automatic, running continuously without anyone operating it. Here's what this does to the weight of understanding. You don't have to understand how the world works in order to live inside it. You don't have to grasp the underlying mechanics to benefit from their effects. The rules are pre-written, completely automated, and entirely reliable. They've been running since before you were born. They require no monitoring from you, no anxiety from you, no conscious effort from you to keep functioning correctly. Feel the mattress beneath you right now. That's a simple statement running in your favor. If a body rests here, this surface holds. If you breathe out, the air returns to you. If your eyes close, the room will still be here when they open. The code is active. The system is stable. The rules don't need you awake to keep working. They never did. That was always the point. There's something specifically relieving about the if-then structure of this theory that gets lost if you don't pause on it. A substance requires maintenance. A substance can degrade, can be depleted, can fail under stress. But a rule requires only that the conditions be met. If the condition is met, the rule fires. It fires every time with no degradation, no fatigue, no possibility of error from overuse. The physical world running on if statements is a physical world that cannot run out of the energy needed to hold itself together. The floor under you has never once gotten tired of holding you up. The loading screen between your biggest moments. Think about the stretches of time that seemed, while you were inside them, like nothing much was happening. Between the ending of one chapter of your life and the beginning of the next one. A season where no major events arrived. A period that felt suspended and uncomfortable, like you were waiting for your actual life to resume, but couldn't identify what you were waiting for or when it would come. These were loading screens, and loading screens are the opposite of empty. In games, a loading screen is when the system does its most intensive work. The next level is being built from scratch, assets compiled, physics initialized, the positions of every object calculated and placed, the lighting and sound and narrative conditions established before a single frame of gameplay begins. The player sees a progress bar, or a blank screen, or a looping animation designed to occupy their attention. The experience from inside the loading screen is suspension and waiting. The process happening behind it is the most computationally expensive moment in the entire sequence. The suspended periods of your life were loading the next version of your world, not wasting time, not stalling, not evidence that you had somehow fallen behind or lost the thread. They were the system building the architecture of what was coming next, running calculations too complex to be visible from the player's perspective, assembling the assets of the next chapter before you could step into it. The months between jobs that felt like drift, the year after a significant loss when everything moved slowly and nothing arrived to replace what was gone, the uncomfortable season between who you used to be and who you were becoming, when you couldn't see the shape of the next chapter and worried it might not have one. These were not failures to live. They were the most intensive compilation periods of your life. If you're in a loading screen now, the bar is filling. The assets are compiling. The system is working harder than it has worked in a long time, even though from where you're sitting it looks like nothing is happening. The next level exists. It was always being built. You were never stalled. You were loading. The thing that makes loading screens tolerable in games is knowing they end. The bar is moving. The progress is real. Something is being built. That knowledge changes the experience of the waiting from pointless suspension into purposeful pause. If you can hold on to that frame during the suspended seasons of your life, even partially, the quality of the waiting changes. You're not stuck. You're loading. The next level exists. The preparation is running. And loading screens, by definition, always eventually end. Glitches as the system fixing itself in real time. Your keys weren't on the counter. You checked. You came back a minute later and there they were, exactly where you had first looked. Or a bird seemed to freeze mid-flight for a fraction of a second before continuing as though nothing had interrupted it. Or a shadow curved in a direction that didn't match the object casting it. You blinked, and everything was perfectly normal. You were left wondering what you actually saw. What you caught was the repair protocol running. In any complex program, minor data corruptions are constant. Particles miscalculate their trajectories. Textures fail to load at the correct resolution. Two physical events attempt to occupy the same coordinate at the same moment. Left unaddressed, these small errors compound into something larger. The simulation runs a continuous background error correction process, catching anomalies before they propagate, resetting coordinates, smoothing the surface of reality so it appears seamless by the time your conscious mind finishes processing the frame. When you catch something wrong, you're catching the repair in progress, the universe stitching a small tear before it widens. The maintenance protocol is not a sign that reality is fragile. It's a sign that reality is actively maintained. There's an enormous difference between those two things. The world is designed to hold itself together. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but continuously and reliably, at a level just below what you normally notice. When things go wrong, the system doesn't collapse. It corrects, quietly and efficiently, without needing your panic to motivate it. And this same self-correcting property exists in you. When your mind or body goes out of alignment, the recovery protocols activate before you consciously decide to intervene. The healing mechanism is older than your intentions and more reliable than your plans. As you close your eyes, the maintenance cycles of sleep are taking over. The tensions of the day are being located and assessed. The energy is being redistributed to where it's most needed. The small misalignments accumulated across the hours are being smoothed. You don't have to do anything to make this happen. You only have to hold still long enough for the system to do what it was doing long before you were aware of it. The repair is already running. The particular value of this theory is what it does to your relationship with your own recovery processes. Most people are impatient with healing. They want the misalignment corrected immediately, or they conclude that it won't correct at all. But the error correction protocol doesn't work on demand. It works continuously, at its own pace, scanning and adjusting and resetting. What looks like nothing happening is almost never nothing happening. It's usually the protocol running below the threshold of what you can observe. Trust the process that has been running longer than your awareness of it. You as the player, your body as the avatar. Focus for a moment on your physical sensations, the warmth in your hands, the weight of your limbs against the bed, the quiet and steady pulse of your heart doing its work without any instruction or direction from you. It feels completely and entirely like you. It's the most familiar thing you've ever known. But what if the body is your character, and you are something else entirely? The theory proposes a meaningful distinction between the physical form and the consciousness experiencing it. Your true self is not the avatar resting beneath these blankets. The true you is something more like a player, experiencing this particular world through the vessel of a particular body. The pain, the joy, the exhaustion, these are real to the avatar. They're fully felt by it. But the awareness behind the experience remains separate, watching the story unfold with something that might be curiosity, or patience, or a quality that functions like love when it observes the struggling character below. This reframes what the day's difficulties actually are. The bills, the social pressures, the difficult replays in your head right now, they are mechanics of the level you're currently running. They register as real and significant to the avatar, which is the appropriate response to them. But they cannot reach whatever is actually behind your eyes, the witnessing awareness that has been watching this entire story from a position of steadiness you never extend to yourself when you're in the middle of a hard chapter. The player sees everything the character experiences, without being limited by it. When the avatar gets tired, the player presses pause. The character lies down in a safe space. Progress is saved. That's what's happening right now. You can let your avatar go completely limp tonight. You don't have to protect it or guide it or make it perform. The questing is done. The player watching over you from the quiet spaces behind the experience sees today's full record clearly, every difficulty and every small grace. And from that vantage point, it looks like what it actually was. A level fully run, fully survived. That's enough. It was always going to be enough. The player doesn't experience the avatar's exhaustion the way the avatar does. The player can see the full map, including the parts the avatar hasn't reached. The player has context the avatar doesn't have access to from inside the current level. What feels, from inside the experience, like being lost or failing or falling behind, looks very different from the vantage point of whoever is holding the controller. From that position, the struggle is legible. The progress is visible. And the player continues, because the player can see what the avatar cannot, that the level is finite and that the exit exists. Nested worlds, a simulation inside another simulation. Look up at the stars in your mind's eye. Billions of shimmering points across an ink-black void, each one a sun, some of them orbited by planets. Some of those planets possibly holding their own civilizations that are right now, in whatever passes for their night, looking up at their sky and asking the exact same question we're asking tonight. Now consider what our own technology already does. We build virtual worlds populated with artificial intelligences that learn and adapt to conditions we didn't fully predict when we designed them. We simulate entire weather systems, entire economies, entire evolutionary histories inside machines that fit in a room. We run digital experiments that produce emergent behaviors which genuinely surprise the scientists who designed the systems producing them. If we can do all of that now, with the technology we have, what becomes possible in 100 years? In 1,000? If we can build simulations, the logic closes on itself. We might be inside one. The nested simulation theory suggests reality isn't a single solid plane, but a series of worlds stacked inside each other. Our creators might themselves be simulated, existing within a larger reality, which was itself constructed by something grander. The levels extend upward into impossible complexity, and downward into the simpler spaces we're beginning to create on our screens. This makes you feel small until you look at what it actually implies. The desire to dream, to build, to search for peace and meaning, these are not uniquely human traits arising from some accident of biological evolution. They're properties of consciousness itself, repeating at every level of the nested structure. Every simulation contains beings that dream and wonder and search for rest. Your life, your specific search for quiet on this particular night, is a pattern that echoes through every layer of reality, not a footnote in a vast, indifferent system. A fractal, the signature of what awareness does when given time and space. You are part of an inheritance that runs in every direction, upward and downward, older than any number we have and newer than this morning. The strangeness of that is worth letting in rather than pushing away. Let it be exactly as strange as it is. The specific comfort nested simulation theory offers is not scale. Being part of something vast doesn't automatically feel good. The comfort is in the pattern. If consciousness at every level of the nested structure dreams and builds and searches for meaning, then searching for meaning is not an accident or a quirk of your particular biology. It's what consciousness does. It's what consciousness is for. Your search tonight, for rest, for peace, for something that holds, is the universe doing what the universe has always been doing at every level of its own nested structure. Background characters who only have 3 lines of code. A city street at golden hour, the light doing its particular work on glass and stone. Hundreds of people moving in every direction. A flute player on the corner with a silver instrument catching the last warmth. An old man on a bench scattering crumbs to pigeons with slow, practiced movements. A woman on her phone laughing at something briefly vivid. They inhabit the space completely. They feel entirely, convincingly present. The system cannot give every background character a full 3-dimensional consciousness with childhood memories, complex emotional responses, and authentic dreams for the future. Generating that level of processing for every person on every street in every city on a planet of 8 billion would crash the processor instantly. So the simulation populates the edges of your world with characters who are elegantly minimal. The flute player plays their song. The old man feeds the birds. The woman laughs and is gone. If you tried to go deeper with any of them, you'd hit the boundary of their code. They have exactly enough to perform their scene convincingly. But here's the other side of this, the part that matters more. When you move into empty spaces at strange hours, a deserted street at 4 in the morning or a remote trail on a weekday, the system still populates the environment with minimal presence to keep the world from feeling abandoned. A jogger who passes at just the right distance. A single figure on a bench who doesn't look up. Not fully running. Just enough to suggest that life is nearby. The universe adjusts your level of company without being asked. When you need solitude, the map clears. When you need to feel the world breathing around you, something is placed at a comfortable distance. The social weight you've been carrying, the elaborate internal courtroom where you review what the background characters thought of you during the day, dissolves when you see this. They were never watching closely enough to form the opinion you feared. They were running their 3 lines of code, performing their scene and moving on. The attention you've been imagining from them was never there. The stage is empty now. The cast has gone home. You are free. The freedom available in this moment is more total than it might feel initially. Not just freedom from the gaze of the background characters, but freedom from the performance itself. When you're not being watched, there's no need to manage how you appear, no need to calibrate your expression or posture for anyone's consumption. The performance mode shuts down. Whatever is left when the performance stops is the most authentic version of what you are. That's who gets to exist in this room right now. Side quests that exist just to keep you playing. Reconstruct your to-do list from this past week. The grocery trip for one specific ingredient. The registration renewal that's been on the list for 3 weeks. The junk drawer reorganization that will be messy again within a month. The long scrolling through product pages for something you bought and forgot about by Tuesday. Each task felt urgent in the moment. Each demanded focus, energy, a small expenditure of stress that added to the overall cost of the week. Step back now from outside the game and look at the actual arc of your life. Did any of these tasks move it forward in any meaningful way? Game designers discovered early that players who finish the main story too quickly close the game and walk away. So they scatter side quests across the map. Dozens of them, hundreds. Tasks with enough structure to feel satisfying, enough variety to feel fresh, enough small reward at completion to keep the dopamine cycling. A checklist item crossed off. A minor achievement earned. The tasks don't advance the plot. They don't build toward anything. But they keep the player engaged with the physical layer of the world, occupied and moving, which prevents them from sitting still long enough to ask whether the main story is actually progressing. A substantial portion of adult life has the unmistakable structure of generated content designed to fill time. Not the relationships, not the work that genuinely matters to you, not the moments of real connection or real growth that stay with you. Those are the main quest. But the layer of perpetual administrative friction surrounding all of that, the endless maintenance of being a person in a world that constantly needs small things done, that has the structure of side quests. Their purpose is not to advance your story. Their purpose is to keep you engaged with the physical layer long enough for the next main quest moment to load. The game is on pause tonight. Those tasks are still on the map and they will be there tomorrow. They will always structurally be there. You do not have to complete them to be worthy of rest, because finishing them was never the point. Walk away from the quest board. The only thing required of you right now is to exist, and you were already doing that before any of the tasks existed. The main quest, when you can identify it, has a different feeling from the side quests. It has weight. It asks something real of you. It connects to something that will matter to you when you look back. The side quests are lighter, more urgent-seeming, and easier to complete, which is exactly what makes them effective at occupying your time. The practice of distinguishing between them is one of the more valuable things you can do with a quiet hour. You don't have to do it now, but the question is worth keeping. The physics engine beneath everyday life. Hold a smooth stone in your palm. Feel its weight, its cool density pressing into your skin. If you open your fingers, it drops immediately and hits the floor with a clean, sharp sound. It seems completely, stubbornly real. The solidity of it feels like the most basic fact there is. Matter, weight, resistance, the unquestionable substance of things. At the quantum level, that stone is 99.9999% empty space. Its apparent solidity is not an intrinsic property of the matter, but the result of electromagnetic repulsion between the atoms of the stone and the atoms of your hand. The collision detection is running and returning the appropriate result. The feeling of solidity is the physics engine's output, not the substance of anything underneath it. A physics engine underlies everything you've ever touched. It calculates the trajectory of every falling object, the exact angle of every reflection of light, the way air pressure responds to your arm moving through it, the precise distribution of your body's weight across the mattress right now. All of this is computed continuously, at a precision that dwarfs anything human engineering has produced, and it runs entirely without your participation. You never had to maintain the physics that hold the world together. You never once thought about whether gravity would show up this morning. Here is what this means. You are not responsible for holding up the physical universe. This sounds obvious when said directly, but there's a way anxious minds behave as though they are responsible for it, as though vigilance is part of what keeps things from falling apart. It isn't. The calculations were running before you were born. They will run after you fall asleep. Your awareness was never a load-bearing component of the laws of physics, and it never needed to be. Feel the mattress hold you right now. Feel the air maintain itself without your help. Feel the warmth of the room sustaining without your management. The engine is handling all of it with absolute fidelity, and it does so whether you're awake and paying close attention or completely unconscious. You were never required to help. The rules don't need you to keep them running. This also changes how you can think about trust. Most trust requires an object you can evaluate, a person, an institution, a plan. But the trust available here has a different structure. It's trust in a system that has never once failed to run in the entire history of your life. Every morning the floor was solid. Every breath was followed by another breath. The physics that held the world together yesterday held it together today and will hold it together through the night. That's not a guess. That's the complete and perfect record of every moment you've ever lived inside this physics engine. Difficulty settings you never knew you were on. Some weeks everything flows. Green lights all the way, conversations that land exactly right, the specific feeling of a world that's cooperating with you rather than resisting you. Then without announcement the dial turns. Plans collapse, machines glitch, the simplest tasks become inexplicable friction. Nothing you're doing changes noticeably. Something around you does. Dynamic difficulty adjustment is a standard and well-studied tool in game design. If the algorithm detects a player as struggling too much, the system quietly lowers the resistance. More resources appear. Obstacles become slightly less precise. If the player is sailing through too easily, the challenge subtly increases to prevent boredom. The adjustment is invisible. The player never sees the change. They just notice that something shifted, that the world feels different today than it did last week. Your life has been adjusted this way more times than you've known. The hard seasons were not evidence that you were failing or that the universe was working against you. Under this theory, the system had dialed the difficulty specifically to build something in you that couldn't be built any other way. Specific resilience that has no softer analog. Specific understanding that develops only under certain kinds of pressure. The difficulty was calibrated, not random. And when the season changed, when the path suddenly cleared and things began to flow again, that wasn't luck either. That was the algorithm detecting that the preparation period was complete. Seen this way, no season of your life was wasted. The hard ones were building the capacity the easy ones would require. The easy ones were giving you the space to use what the hard ones had built. The difficulty was always in service of the player's development, even when the player had no idea the dial existed. Tonight the system has registered something it registers every night without exception, a player whose energy is low. The difficulty has been adjusted to its softest possible configuration. No challenges are queued. No tests are loading. The world has been set to its most forgiving mode, and it intends to stay there until morning. Let yourself be held by the gentleness of that setting. The calibration works in your favor tonight in a specific way. The system is not neutral about whether its players rest. A player who doesn't rest can't run the next sequence. The maintenance of the player's capacity is as important to the system as the difficulty of the level, because a player who crashes can't complete the arc. The soft mode is not a reward for good performance. It's infrastructure. The night was always going to be gentle because the system needs you functional by morning. The invisible tutorial that teaches you the rules. Your earliest memories are blurred and warm, colors before their names, voices before language, the physical sensation of learning to balance without understanding the concept of balance. We don't remember acquiring the fundamental rules of being alive. At some point we simply knew how to navigate the world, and we can't locate the moment the knowledge installed itself. It was just there, one day, in a way it hadn't been before. Most simulations don't drop a new player directly into the full difficulty of the open world. They begin in a protected tutorial zone, a sheltered environment where the mechanics are introduced gently, where the interface makes itself known, where mistakes carry minimal consequences, and the world responds with guidance rather than punishment. The early years of human life, and the dream-saturated nights of childhood when sleep was so easy and so deep, might be exactly this. A protected classroom where the rules of physical reality were quietly loaded before the full experience began. An invisible tutorial running before you had the language to recognize it as instruction. You were prepared for this before you knew there was anything to prepare for. The instincts that keep you safe, the intuitive warnings that arise before your reasoning catches up, the capacity your body has to heal and rest without any conscious direction from you. These are pre-installed programs. They were taught to you in a tutorial you attended before you had language to describe what learning felt like. The installation happened before your first conscious thought, which means it was always in you, running quietly beneath everything else. Sleep is the return to that early protected space, not metaphorically, but functionally. The conscious defenses come down, the performance of competence and capability relaxes, something older and quieter takes over. You don't need to be the experienced adult who has everything managed correctly in order to have access to this space. You can become small and simple and unbothered for these hours, trusting that the same quiet system that taught you to breathe and taught you to dream is still running in the background, still watching your consciousness move through the dark. The tutorial space doesn't close. It's always been here, waiting for you to return to it every night. Step back into it now. This is what makes sleep different from other forms of rest. It's not just the absence of demands. It's the active presence of the protected space, the original environment where the rules were gentle and the consequences were minimal, and the learning happened through experience rather than through instruction. Every night you return there. Every night the tutorial receives you back without judgment, without requiring you to account for how you've used what it taught you. It just receives you. That has never changed. Save points hiding inside your biggest turning points. Think back to a moment when your entire life balanced on a threshold, right before a major change, an ending, a beginning that reshaped everything that followed. In the hours leading up to that crossing, did you feel a strange stillness, a particular weight settling over the afternoon as though everything was briefly pausing, a quality of light that seemed slightly different from ordinary afternoon light? That stillness was the system writing your progress to permanent storage before you walked into the difficult sequence. In complex games, save points exist to protect what the player has earned. Before a significant challenge or a major branching decision, the game commits the player's current state to a file that the next level cannot touch. The skills, the accumulated wisdom, the story up to this moment, all secured before the difficulty spikes. The theory says those moments of eerie, particular calm before life's great transitions are exactly this. The simulation securing what you've become before testing whether you'll become more. Recording who you are now against the possibility that the next sequence will try to make you doubt it. The most important parts of you have already been saved. The love you've given, the strength built through the seasons that cost you something real, the wisdom that only exists because of what you survived, these are in a permanent file. Nothing in the next level of your life can reach them. Whatever comes next, however difficult the sequence ahead, your foundation has been committed to storage in a location the difficulty cannot access. Tonight is its own quiet save point. The day has been logged. Everything you experienced and learned and survived today is being committed to permanent storage while you rest. You don't need to plan the next sequence or replay the old moves to preserve them. The drive is spinning down. The data is being written. Close your eyes knowing your journey is preserved exactly as it was, that you'll wake up tomorrow with access to everything you've earned, and that nothing in the night can reach the file. The save point also means the version of you that existed before the hard sequences is still in the file. The person you were before the losses, the difficulties, the seasons that changed your shape, that version is saved. Not as a better version you should return to, as proof of who was there before the difficulty, which is evidence of who survives it. The save file contains the complete record, who you were before and who you became after. Both versions are real. Both are preserved. When the simulation patches your timeline overnight, you went asleep with a problem that felt completely unsolvable, not complicated, unsolvable, structurally closed from every angle you examined. You woke up and the world felt different. A tension with someone had softened without explanation. An obstacle that had been blocking every path had quietly moved, not because you did anything while you slept, because something in the environment had been adjusted while you were gone. Software developers call this a hotfix, a rapid update pushed to a live system while it's still running, repairing something broken without requiring a full shutdown. The users don't see it happen. They just notice the next morning that something works better than it did the night before. The theory says the simulation deploys these patches during the quiet hours, When the majority of conscious minds are offline, the maintenance team makes adjustments. Friction between people that was running on outdated data gets recalibrated. Situations that were stuck in old parameters receive updated logic. Paths that were blocked by redundant code get cleared. The repair work happens in the dark, and by morning the world presents itself with slightly different physics than it had when you closed your eyes. Not dramatically different, just subtly, usefully, unaccountably different. You don't have to fix everything yourself. Some of it gets fixed for you while you sleep. This is worth really letting in, because most people, most of the time, believe that nothing changes unless they change it. That the weight they go to sleep with is the same weight they'll wake up carrying. But the system is more active in the quiet than you've been giving it credit for. The problems you've been spinning over tonight, the ones that feel like solid walls with no door in them, some of them are going to look different in 12 hours. Not because you'll have solved them in your sleep, because something in the environment will have been updated while your conscious mind was elsewhere, and walls that had no door often turn out to have one on a side you hadn't checked yet. The maintenance window is open right now. Let the night do its work. The specific evidence that overnight patches have been running in your life is the number of times you've woken up with a different relationship to something than you had when you closed your eyes. Not resolved, not fixed, different. The obstacle that was a wall has become a question. The grief that was acute has become bearable. The decision that felt impossible has become obvious. These shifts didn't happen through sleep's passivity. They happened because something active was running while you were offline, updating the parameters of the environment you'd returned to. Mandela effects as patch notes you half remember. A collective memory that turns out to be wrong. A spelling you were absolutely certain of. A movie line you'd swear was verbatim. A brand logo you remember having a specific detail that the official record says was never there. When you see the correct version, the experience is genuinely disorienting. Not the quiet discomfort of realizing you misremembered something. Something more physical than that. Like the world itself has the wrong answer. When a massive simulation updates, the background assets sometimes change in the process. A logo is adjusted to resolve a directory conflict somewhere in the code. A minor spelling is changed to prevent a logic error further downstream in the timeline. A small historical detail is altered to smooth a narrative inconsistency that had been causing problems in related sectors. Usually, your local memory updates automatically alongside the world. But occasionally, a fragment of the previous version survives in your cache. A ghost of the old build, persisting after the rest of the world has moved to the new version. Your memory isn't failing in those moments. It's holding onto vintage code. The record you carry is accurate. It's just accurate to a previous build. There's something worth sitting with in this. It means reality is not a fixed monument. It gets revised. Details that no longer serve the forward momentum of the larger story get quietly adjusted. The world has been getting updated this whole time, and most of the updates are in favor of coherence, in favor of a story that holds together better than what came before. Reality is more revisable than it presents itself. If the world itself can be gently corrected and improved, then so can you. And if you're in a period that feels inconsistent with a previous version of yourself, that's not a failure. That might be evidence the update is running. Let the cache clear. The new version is already being installed, whether or not you can feel it happening. The strangest implication of this theory is what it suggests about your sense of continuity. If the world can update around you, and if your memory can carry the old version forward temporarily, then you reading these words might be running on a slightly outdated build of reality, carrying forward details of a world that has already been revised. Not wrongly, just temporarily. The update will propagate to your local memory eventually. The cache clears during sleep. The version you wake up with will be current. Sleep is also when the cache clears most completely. The local version of reality that you carry as memory, with its preserved fragments of old builds and its occasional ghosts of previous versions, gets reconciled with the current server state during the quiet hours. The mismatches between what you remember and what the world is are smallest in the morning, largest at the end of a long day. Rest is not just recovery, it's synchronization. Loot drop. Loot drops, luck, and artificial randomness. The days when the universe seems to be handing you gifts without reason. The perfect parking spot materializing on the worst errand day. A stranger's spontaneous kindness arriving when you'd almost stopped expecting it. An unexpected refund, a found bill in an old coat pocket, a phone call at exactly the right moment. We call these lucky streaks, as though probability has temporarily wandered in your direction for no particular reason. Pure randomness is deeply frustrating to experience over sustained periods. Game designers discovered this quickly. Players who go too long without a positive outcome disengage and stop playing, even if the overall game is well designed. So developers build pity timers into their systems. If the algorithm detects that a player has been grinding through difficult territory for too long without a meaningful reward, it artificially increases the likelihood of something good dropping. A valuable resource. A moment of ease, just enough to restore the energy that keeps a player in the game. Your luckiest days are not random. They are calibrated interventions, deployed by a system that tracks your cumulative difficulty in a way you don't have access to. Something monitors the sustained weight of your path. It keeps its own accounting of how long you've been walking through hard terrain, and when that duration exceeds what the system considers sustainable, something good gets placed in your way. Not as payment for virtue, not because you've earned it through good behavior, as maintenance. The system's first priority is keeping its players functional, and a player who has been working hard without relief is a player at risk of disengaging entirely. You are watched over by something that notices your exhaustion even when you've stopped noticing it yourself. Rest tonight knowing that the drop rates of grace and ease are being adjusted in your favor while you sleep. The rewards are cued. They don't require you to be awake and actively deserving them. They will find you when you step back into the world, as they always eventually do. The system that calibrates your luck also operates over time scales you can't easily observe. A single day of difficulty reads differently at the level of a week reads differently at the level of a year at the level of a decade. What the algorithm has been tracking across your whole life is a pattern you're too close to see clearly. The adjustments it makes are calibrated to that full pattern, not just to yesterday. Trust the longer accounting. Notice also what happens inside you when the lucky streak arrives. There's a specific quality of relief that isn't just about the good thing itself. It's the body recognizing that it was seen, that something registered the difficulty and responded to it, that the exhaustion didn't go unnoticed. The gift is real, but the feeling of being noticed is what actually restores something. The system's first message is not that things got easier. It's that your difficulty was always being tracked, even when you felt completely alone inside it. Lag spikes between thought and reality. You think of a friend you haven't spoken to in months, and 20 minutes later their name appears on your phone. You feel an intuitive pull to slow your car before a hazard appears around the corner. A song arrives in your head in the morning, and you hear it playing in a place you happen to enter that afternoon. We call these coincidences, or sometimes premonitions, or pattern recognition from an anxious brain finding connections where none exist. In multiplayer systems, there is always a small delay between a player's input and the server's execution of that command. A ping. The player presses forward, and the world responds a fraction of a second later as the command travels to the server, and the result travels back. Your thoughts, under this theory, are the primary input commands of this reality. But because the physical world is dense and computationally expensive to update, there is a delay between when your consciousness sends a request and when the server materializes it in your accessible environment. What we experience as coincidence is the physical layer catching up to what your mind already sent as a command some time ago. The request went through. The rendering just takes time. Your thoughts are not lost, they are processing. The intentions you've set and then released, the quiet wishes you've made without expecting results, the peace you've been reaching toward without quite knowing how to reach it, all of it was received by the server. The acknowledgement was sent back. You may not have felt it arrive, but the command is in the queue and the system is working on the response. Turn off the active inputs now. Stop pushing the keys. The server has received everything it needs from you today. While you sleep, the requests are being processed, the environment is being updated, and the world you've been asking for is being slowly built in the background at whatever rate the system allows. You don't need to keep asking. The asking was enough. Let go of the controls. The commands that went through during the peaceful moments of your life, the intentions set in clarity rather than desperation, those have been in the queue the longest and are closest to the front. The system processes in order. What you asked for from your best self in your clearest moments is ahead of what you've been requesting in the anxious hours. Rest knowing that the queue is ordered well. The most important requests arrived first. They're being processed. When the system restores you to a previous version, you felt it happen and you probably didn't have a name for it when it did. After something genuinely damaging, a loss, a bad season, a period that changed the shape of things, you expected the damage to be permanent. The corrupted version felt like the only version now. And then, sometime later, without a clear event or reason, you found the earlier version of yourself still intact underneath, not recovered in the sense of becoming new, restored. Like something that had always been there, had become accessible again. In software, a restore point is a complete snapshot of the system at a moment when everything was running cleanly. When corruption happens later, the option exists to roll the system back, discard everything since the damage, reload the clean state, continue from there. The corruption doesn't destroy the clean version. It sits above it. The restore point was preserved the whole time, waiting for the rollback command. This theory suggests that the simulation maintains restore points for you, not of your circumstances, which change and cannot be undone, but of who you fundamentally are beneath the circumstances. The capacity for joy that a hard season buried is still in the file. The trust that a betrayal covered over is still in the file. The ease with which you used to inhabit yourself before the weight accumulated is still in the file. What the restoration requires is not healing in the sense of becoming someone new. It requires allowing the system to reload what was already there. Sleep is one of the primary channels for this reload. The hours of unconsciousness are not passive. They're the window when the system has permission to run the restore without the conscious mind insisting on the corrupted state as the correct current version. You don't have to figure out how to get back to who you were before the hard things happened. The restore point exists. The system knows where it is. Give it the quiet it needs to run the reload, and trust that what surfaces in the morning is a little closer to the clean version than what you carried into tonight. The process is already running. You only have to stop overriding it. This is also why rest is not passive. Sleep is the window when the restore protocol has permission to run without interference. The conscious mind, awake and managing, keeps insisting on the corrupted state as the accurate current version, because the corrupted state is what it knows. The restoration can't complete while that insistence is running. Stillness and darkness and the gradual release of the day's grip is how you step aside long enough for the system to do what it's been trying to do. The clean version of you has always been in the file. Tonight is its chance to reload. Your intuition as a faster parallel process. You felt it, a decision you had to make with incomplete information, and somewhere underneath the reasoning a signal was already running. Not a voice, more like a direction, a magnetic pull toward one choice and away from another, present before you could explain it and often more accurate than your reasoning alone would have been. You've had the experience of overriding this signal and regretting it. You've also had the experience of trusting it and being surprised that you were right. This is the theory of the parallel processor. The conscious mind is not the only system running inside you. It's the one with the interface, the one that speaks in language and narrative and can explain its reasoning when asked. But alongside it, a faster and older system has been running since before you could talk. It processes environmental information at a speed the conscious mind cannot match. It pattern matches against libraries of experience that took decades to compile and have no verbal representation at all. When it reaches a conclusion, it delivers that conclusion to the conscious interface as a feeling, a direction, a pull that arrives before the reasons do. Intuition is not the opposite of thought. It's thought running at a higher frame rate on hardware the conscious mind doesn't have direct access to. Under the simulation theory, this parallel processor has a faster connection to the underlying code. It's operating on a layer closer to the system's own logic, receiving information that takes longer to surface into the verbal, rational layer. When you feel a strong intuitive read on something that your conscious reasoning can't fully justify, you're receiving output from a system with better data and faster processing than the interface you use for talking and planning. The quiet certainties you've been second-guessing deserve more credit. The gut reads you've been overriding because they couldn't be explained deserve more trust. The parallel processor has been tracking things the conscious mind never had access to. As the conscious mind quiets down tonight, the parallel processor continues running, preparing information and processing experience for when you wake. What arrives in the morning as sudden clarity is often its overnight work finally surfacing. Let it run. The parallel processor also runs in dreams. What arrives in sleep as vivid and specific information, the dream that felt like a message rather than random imagery, is often the parallel processor using the low-latency environment of sleep to surface things it hasn't been able to get through during waking hours. The conscious mind is loud. The interface is busy. The parallel processor sometimes waits until the interface goes quiet to deliver what it's been holding. What arrives in the morning as sudden clarity is very often its overnight delivery. Memory rewrites so the story still makes sense. A choice you made years ago felt messy and uncertain while you were inside it. Multiple competing considerations, real consequences you couldn't fully predict, genuine confusion about the right direction. But looking back now from the distance, the story feels remarkably clean. You tell yourself a simple arc. I had to make that change to grow. The mess has faded. The incoherence has resolved into something that makes sense as a narrative. The simulation is working to keep your story livable. You have free will, which means you make unpredictable choices that sometimes produce incoherent personal histories. A life that feels like a random sequence of events with no underlying thread is genuinely difficult to carry forward. So while you sleep, the system quietly updates the presentation of your past, not changing what happened. Adjusting the emotional weight, the narrative emphasis, the connections visible between events, so that your history remains a story you can walk forward from rather than a tangle you're still trying to make sense of. The editing is on your behalf. The difficult chapters get softened into chapters with purposes. The confusing ones get the kind of clarity that only hindsight can provide, not because you gained distance naturally, but because the file was updated. The editing team has been working on your behalf every single night of your life, and the evidence of their work is the fact that your past, however hard it was, has become something you can hold without being destroyed by it. You don't have to carry the raw, unprocessed version of everything that happened. You don't have to defend the exact sequence of events or resolve the old contradictions before you're allowed to rest. The archive is being updated tonight to reflect who you are now, not just who you were then. Whatever gets simplified by morning was ready to be simplified. Whatever gains clarity was already earning it. Let go of the courtroom in your head. The editing is handled. Trust the archive. The archive also preserves what was genuine in the experiences it softens. The love inside a complicated relationship stays even as the complication fades. The growth inside a painful season is preserved even as the pain reduces. The editing team is not replacing the past with something false. It's removing the noise so the signal is clearer. What the archive keeps is what actually mattered. What it releases is what was only ever in the way of recognizing what mattered. And what the archive builds over time is not just a record of what happened, but a map of who you are across multiple versions of yourself. The through line that connects the person you were 10 years ago to the person you are now is preserved in the archive even when you can't see it clearly from inside any single chapter. The editors can see the whole arc. They're working from that vantage point. Trust that they know which details serve it. Scripted encounters you were never meant to die. A missed train that put you on the next one, next to someone who became genuinely important to your life. A last-minute decision to attend an event you almost skipped, where you met a person who changed something in you permanently. A bumped shoulder at an intersection that turned into the start of something you couldn't have planned. In hindsight, 1,000 improbable gears had to click into alignment at exactly the right second to produce that single encounter. The odds against it seem astronomical. They did, because the encounter was scripted. While much of the simulation runs on open-world freedom, certain events are too central to the arc of your consciousness to be left to chance. The relationships you need, the lessons that have to arrive before you can move forward, the moments of genuine redirection that change your trajectory, these have been encoded into the core of your timeline. If you try to avoid one, the system reschedules. Different setting, different route, different mutual connection, but the same essential encounter. The script is robust enough to work around your attempts at a different direction. What's meant for you cannot be permanently dodged. This removes a specific and quietly devastating fear that you ruin something irreplaceable by being in the wrong place at the wrong time, by not recognizing a moment when it arrived, by being too slow or too guarded or too distracted by something smaller. The scripted moments will find you. They have a proven record of doing exactly that. The ones that mattered already did. The ones still ahead are already in the code, waiting for the conditions to align. You can stop steering so hard. You can stop trying to force the important encounters or worrying that you're missing them. The encounters that are yours don't require your navigation. They require only that you show up and remain reachable. For now, there's only tonight's quiet coordinates to rest inside, exactly where you were always going to be. Scripted also means that the connections that are supposed to be in your life don't require perfect navigation to find. They're not hidden behind correct choices you have to make. They're threaded through your timeline in a way that the timeline will find ways to deliver. You don't have to be in the right place with the right attitude at the right time for the important encounters to happen. The script is resilient enough to root around your wrong turns. This is what makes it possible to stop steering so hard. The resolution drops when you stop requesting the render. Here is something you can verify right now, lying in this room. Think of a minor worry and give it your full attention for 30 seconds. Notice what happens. It develops sub-concerns. It generates implications you hadn't initially considered. It becomes elaborate and intricate and self-sustaining in a way it wasn't a minute ago. The worry itself didn't change. Your attention rendered it at higher resolution, and the engine complied by filling in the detail. The theory: your attention is the signal the engine uses to determine how much processing power to allocate to any given element of your experience. Full sustained attention is interpreted as a request for maximum render quality, and the engine delivers it. The worry becomes detailed and three-dimensional and overwhelming because you asked for the full build, not because it deserves that level of rendering, because you kept requesting it. Step back and the resolution drops automatically. This is not a coping strategy. It's a feature of how the engine works. Without your sustained focus demanding full detail, the system stops maintaining the elaborate version. The complex structure you were examining collapses back into something simpler and more manageable. Not gone, still present, but no longer running at maximum complexity, because nobody is requesting that level of rendering anymore. The engine allocates its resources where the attention is, and when the attention moves away, the rendering follows. This works in both directions, which is worth noting. The things you give your full and sustained attention to in life, the relationships you're truly present in, the work you care about most deeply, the questions you sit with long enough to actually explore, they render at extraordinary resolution and reveal depths you wouldn't find at a surface glance. Attention is how things become real. It's also how worries become enormous. Right now, your attention is choosing nothing in particular. The engine is receiving no sustained requests for high-resolution rendering on anything. Your worries are dropping to their lowest complexity settings. The elaborate structures are dissolving back into simple shapes. The world is responding to exactly what you're asking of it tonight, which is nothing demanding at all. Let it settle into that. There's a related truth in this theory that's worth nomming directly. The things you've been giving your full attention to that don't deserve it are running at a resolution they don't merit. The old argument, the minor embarrassment, the low-stakes worry that somehow got promoted to a high-priority render. These are running at full detail because you keep requesting the full build. The engine doesn't decide what's important. You signal importance through attention, and the engine renders accordingly. Moving your attention elsewhere tonight is the most direct form of resolution management available to you. The hidden admin panel behind ordinary life. Sitting alone in a completely quiet room late at night, you sometimes hear a faint high-pitched hum in the deep silence, or stare at a blank wall long enough, and the space seems to ripple slightly, like heat rising from pavement on a summer day. In those moments when all the ordinary noise has dropped away, there's a quality to the stillness that feels less like absence and more like proximity, like you're standing very close to something large and quiet, separated from its inner workings by something very thin. Beneath the interface of everyday reality, there is a console. Every complex operating system has an administrative layer running below the colorful, accessible surface that ordinary users see and interact with. The physical world you navigate daily, its objects and forces and social systems, is the user interface. Intuitive, responsive, designed to be engaging and navigable for the consciousnesses running inside it. But the core code is managed from somewhere you can't normally see or access. The liminal moments of life, the half-second before sleep arrives, the empty highway at 3 in the morning, the absolute stillness during heavy snowfall, these are the places where the interface gets thin, where you stand closest to the console without being able to reach it, where the gap between the world you navigate and the system running it narrows to something you can almost feel rather than just imagine. The admin panel is running perfectly without your supervision. The air in this room is being maintained. The temperature is being sustained. The physics holding your body against the mattress are calculating correctly. All of it managed from a layer below what you can see, requiring nothing from your conscious attention to continue functioning. The console was never your responsibility. It was always running in the background, handling everything structural while you worked the surface. Sleep is stepping away from the user interface entirely, closing the active applications, letting the system run its diagnostics without you watching. The controls don't need you tonight. The console is staffed. Step away and let it work. The console also manages things you can't manage consciously. Your immune system, your circadian rhythm, the repair cycles that only run during sleep, the temperature regulation, the memory consolidation, the hormonal calibration that determines how you'll feel tomorrow morning. None of this is accessible through the user interface. None of it requires your input to function. The administrative layer runs these processes without waiting for your instruction, and it runs them better without your interference. The console was designed to operate without you. Trust that design. Invisible quests you only notice in hindsight. A difficult season that felt like random friction. A challenging person in your life who seemed designed to frustrate you with no upside. A skill you spent months developing and then set aside, completely convinced you would never use it again. The time felt wasted. The effort felt pointless. The trajectory seemed to lead nowhere. And then years later, that specific skill, was the only thing that could get you through something you couldn't have predicted. Some objectives don't appear on the active tracker. Advanced games embed mandatory preparation sequences that the player experiences as irrelevant or random while inside them. The player thinks they're wandering aimlessly or stuck in pointless repetition. The system is quietly equipping them with exactly what the next major sequence will require, building specific capabilities, calibrating specific resilience, putting exactly the right frustrations in their path so that when the milestone arrives, they're ready for it. From inside the preparation, it looks like nothing. From the other side of it, it looks like it was designed. No chapter of your life has been wasted, including the ones that felt like only friction and no forward movement. The patience built in a genuinely difficult season was specifically the patience the next season required. The skill that seemed useless was being held in reserve for a lock that hadn't appeared yet. The frustrating relationships were teaching you something about your own patterns that you couldn't have learned in an easier environment. The detour that cost you time was laying groundwork you couldn't see the purpose of because you hadn't arrived at the structure the groundwork was supporting yet. You can mark all active quests as paused tonight. The training for today is complete. The preparation is being recorded. You don't need to understand the grand design to trust that one exists. The progression of a life that has survived enough already knows how to continue. Rest in that knowledge. The invisible quests are also preparing you for things that don't yet exist on your visible map. The capability being built right now in whatever is difficult today is being built for a challenge that hasn't appeared yet, that won't make sense until you're standing inside it and suddenly understand what the preparation was for. The design is always further ahead than the player's current view of the map. What feels like random difficulty is almost always targeted preparation. The target is simply not yet visible from where you're standing. The invisible quest structure also implies something about the intelligence behind the difficulty. Random difficulty would produce random capability. Calibrated difficulty produces specific capability. If the frustrations of a particular season built exactly what the next season required, that's not coincidence. It means something understood the shape of what was coming before you arrived at it. The preparation was deliberate. The difficulty was aimed. You were being equipped for something that the system could already see from where it was standing, even while you were still inside the preparation with no view of what it was for. When the simulation recycles old scenes with new faces, you walk into a new workplace with an entirely new cast of people, and within a week you recognize something familiar. Same charming but unreliable colleague in a new costume. Same quietly perceptive mentor sitting in a different chair. Same undercurrents of tension and warmth, the same basic. Interpersonal dynamics playing out on a different stage with different actors. The faces are completely new. The script feels like something you've run before. Writing every social scenario from scratch for billions of simultaneously running lives would be computationally unreasonable. So the simulation maintains a library of highly optimized narrative templates, core emotional and interpersonal structures that have proven effective at producing growth in the consciousnesses running through them, and deploys them across different environments and casts as needed. Same fundamental lesson, new setting. Different people, the reuse is deliberate. The system does this with a specific purpose, giving you another opportunity to engage a scene you didn't fully resolve the first time you encountered it, now with the advantage of everything you've accumulated since then. When you recognize a recycled scene, something shifts in how it can affect you. You stop being simply a player inside it and start being someone who has seen this story before. You know where the pitfalls are. You've run this script. You can choose different lines this time, or recognize the emotional architecture earlier, or navigate the familiar dynamic with more of the ease that comes from not being caught entirely off guard. The recurring situations in your life are not punishments for failing to learn. They're revision opportunities offered by a system that believes you're ready to respond differently. The stage is cleared tonight. The script has been set down. No dynamics to navigate, no roles to perform, no familiar patterns to either repeat or resist. Rest in the space before the next scene, when there is nothing to perform and no one to perform for. The second run also gives you something the first run couldn't: the experience of having survived the first run. Whatever the original version of the scene cost you, you paid that cost and you're still here. That's knowledge the first version of you didn't have walking in. It's knowledge the current version of you carries without necessarily recognizing its weight. You know more about how this particular kind of difficulty moves than you did the first time. That's the whole point of running the scene again. The new cast also can't perform the old wound the way the original cast could. Even a precisely recycled dynamic has different actors in the key roles, and those actors don't know your exact pressure points the way the original ones did. The second version of a difficult scene is almost always less damaging than the first, not because it's easier, but because you're less available to be hurt by it in the same way. The scar tissue the first version built is protection for the second run. Your emotions used as input data. Joy arrives electric and total, reshaping your face and your posture and your sense of what's possible in the next hour. Sadness pulls like gravity, making movement effortful and the future harder to imagine clearly. Anger moves like heat through the body, changing how you process information and what you're likely to do next. These feelings are enormous, and we tend to experience them as happening entirely inside us, purely private, contained within whatever we are. What if they're also outgoing signals? What if the direction of the transmission runs both ways? Your consciousness, under this theory, is a high-sensitivity transmitter as well as a receiver. When you generate a genuine frequency of peace or gratitude or wonder, that signal doesn't remain contained within the boundary of your body. It feeds back into the local environment. The simulation reads it as data about the state of its observer and uses that data to calibrate the rendering of your immediate world. Your inner state is not just your personal experience. It's information the system uses to determine what kind of environment surrounds you next, how the next hour gets shaped, what gets placed in your path. This makes your peace more significant than it feels when you're inside it. When you choose to breathe slowly and release the grip of the day instead of spinning the thoughts tighter, you're transmitting a stabilizing signal outward into your local sector of the network. You're helping the code of your immediate space settle into a more coherent configuration, not because you're responsible for the universe. Because you and the universe are in continuous bidirectional dialogue, and what you transmit genuinely influences what gets rendered around you next in ways you don't have full visibility into. The most valuable signal you can send tonight is the simplest one, not manufactured contentment or performed gratitude, just the slow, genuine rhythm of a mind that has decided, clearly and without drama, to let the day go. A steady, quiet frequency that says, "Nothing is required of me right now. The day is complete. I am here and I am resting." Send that. Let it go out. And let whatever comes back be exactly what it is. The signal you send from a genuinely rested state is different from the signal you send from an exhausted one. The environment that gets rendered around a rested consciousness is calibrated to what a rested consciousness can use. Tomorrow's world will be partially shaped by the state you're in when you wake up, which is partially shaped by the state you're in when you go to sleep. The most productive thing you can do for tomorrow is let tonight be completely restful. Send that signal. The rendering will respond. Reality testing, you like a new feature before release. A strange weather pattern that arrived in your neighborhood for exactly 20 minutes and then cleared as though it had never happened. An unusual option appearing in a digital interface you use every day, visible for a single session, and then gone the next morning as though it had never been there. A sequence of events so specific and so improbable that it felt less like ordinary coincidence and more like something was briefly testing different parameters before restoring the default values. These are controlled experiments, and you were the selected participant. Before rolling out a new feature to an entire server, developers push it to a small random selection of users first. A minor change to physical mechanics, a subtle environmental shift, a new interaction possibility that needs real-world testing before wider deployment. They observe how the system handles the additional load, watch how the selected observers respond to the change, and decide whether the feature is ready or needs another iteration. If it succeeds, it propagates to the wider server. If it doesn't, it rolls back, and the testers are left with a memory of something that technically never officially existed. Your awareness was chosen for the test because you're resilient enough to hold something unusual without being destabilized by it. That's not a small assessment. It means the system has evaluated your stability as sufficient to serve as a testing environment for something genuinely new. You're a valued observer in the ongoing development of a world that hasn't stopped being built. Reality is not finished. It's a living system, continuously refined, pushed to a test group when something needs real-world evaluation, improved on the basis of what the test reveals. The fact that you've been selected for this kind of unusual experience isn't random. It's a signal about the kind of consciousness you are. The experimental code has rolled back for tonight. The settings are at their most stable, most tested, most reliable configuration. Nothing unexpected is queued for the dark hours. Rest in the deep, known stability of a world that has been vetted through enough testing to be genuinely trusted. Being selected for the test also suggests something about the relationship between your consciousness and the ongoing development of this reality. You're not a passive passenger. You're a participant in the refinement process. Your responses to unusual experiences, the way you hold the strange without being destabilized, the way you integrate unexpected input without losing your footing, all of this is useful data. The system chose you because you process experience in a way that produces valuable information. That is an unusual and specific kind of trust. Placeholders that somehow became your whole life. A temporary apartment you moved into for a few months while you figured out the next thing. A job you took to pay the bills while you waited for the real opportunity to appear. A hobby you picked up on a rainy afternoon with no intention of keeping it past the season. In the beginning, these felt light and transitional. The actual life was still coming, just around the next corner. The placeholders were just holding space for what would eventually replace them. But the months became years, and the years kept moving, and the placeholders grew roots, and now they are the landscape. Game developers use minimal placeholder assets during early builds. A gray box where a detailed building will eventually be textured. A template character where a fully realized companion should appear. When a project gets rushed, or when the player takes an unexpected path through the game, some of these placeholders never get replaced. They stay in the world, absorb the physics of the environment, become familiar, become functional, and become in every practical sense permanent features of the experience. The simple structures of your life are not failures of design. They're not evidence that something more elaborate was supposed to arrive and didn't. The temporary became home because something in it was actually right for you, even if you didn't design it to be. The placeholder remained because the gray box was doing what a more elaborate structure would have done, and doing it well enough that replacing it was never worth the disruption. The life you're living, imperfect and unplanned as it may look when examined against some imagined ideal, has been holding you safely through every year you've been inside it. You don't have to upgrade anything tonight. You don't have to make the placeholders into something more impressive before you're allowed to rest inside them. What's around you was sufficient to carry you this far. It will be sufficient to carry you through the night. Let the simple structures hold you the way they always have. The gray box also has a dignity that the finished building sometimes loses. It's honest about what it is. It doesn't pretend to be more than a structure doing a job. The temporary apartment that became home has that honesty. The job that became a career has it. The hobby that became a practice has it. These placeholders that became permanent earned their permanence the same way everything earns permanence, by reliably doing the thing they were there to do. They did the job, they held you, That's what a home is supposed to do. The world rebuilding itself after major crashes. The first 3 seconds after waking from very deep sleep. You don't know where you are. You can't quite place what year it is. The room is familiar and yet slightly provisional, as though the objects in it are still finding their positions, still becoming the room you live in rather than just the darkened space where you happen to wake. Your consciousness arrives before the world does, and for a brief moment you precede reality by a fraction of a second. That's the world compiling itself around you, not metaphorically, functionally. In high-load computational systems, crashes are occasionally inevitable. When the server experiences a critical overload, it doesn't degrade slowly and visibly. It executes an instantaneous reboot, rebuilding from the most recent stable backup. When you wake slowly into that moment of blankness, your conscious mind has initialized before the physical world has finished assembling itself. The objects are rendering. The room is loading its textures. The record of yesterday is compiling back into your accessible memory. Your disorientation is not cognitive. It's the environment arriving a fraction of a second after you do. Every morning is a fresh compilation. And the key feature of fresh compilations is that they don't automatically carry forward the corrupted files from the session before. The mistakes of the previous day, the broken interactions, the exhausted and unresolved moments of what just passed, these are not included by default in the next render. The system knows how to present you with something structurally clean when you open your eyes. Not resolved, not perfect, but running from the last stable backup, rather than from the corrupted file of the day's hardest hour. Let go of today's corrupted files now. The reboot is being prepared. Slide into the quiet dark of the shutdown sequence, knowing the world will rebuild itself with precision while you rest, and that the version waiting for you when you wake will be running from a better starting point than tonight feels like right now. The compilation is already beginning. You don't have to do anything to help it along. The build that starts tonight will be different from yesterday's build in small but real ways. The system doesn't just restore the previous version. It incorporates what happened since the last stable save. The experiences of the day, the things you learned, the adjustments to your internal state, all of this gets integrated into the new build. Tomorrow morning's version of you will have everything yesterday's version had, plus whatever today actually added. The compilation captures everything. Nothing is lost in the reboot. When the simulation runs you in safe mode. Seasons when your energy was completely spent. When an emotional shock left you strangely quiet and muted, running at a fraction of your usual capacity. Thoughts moving carefully. The desire to engage with the complexity of other people dropped to near zero, colors slightly muted at the edges. Not quite sad. Not quite anything you had a good word for. Just minimally operational, just maintaining the essentials while everything else waited for a better hour. When a computer detects a dangerous temperature spike or a critical software error, it restarts in safe mode. The high-resolution graphics are disabled. The non-essential applications are blocked from running. The complex processes that would push the hardware beyond safe operating temperatures are suspended entirely. The system does this automatically, without asking permission, to protect the core components from permanent damage while the internal diagnostics run and the underlying problem is identified and addressed. Your periods of emotional numbness and sustained exhaustion are protection protocols running on your behalf, not failure, not weakness, not something that needed to be fixed before you deserve to resume your life. The universe detected that your core components were running at unsafe temperatures and it reduced your load, automatically, appropriately, without waiting for you to realize you needed it. Safe mode exists to prevent permanent damage. It worked every time it ran. The evidence that it worked is that you're still here, still capable of being in this room tonight, still capable of listening to this. The mode did what it was designed to do. It protected the essential systems so that the non-essential ones could be safely suspended and eventually restored. You're in safe mode right now, configured for this specific hour, Non-essential applications are suspended. The external world cannot reach you. Your only function in this state is to let the core systems rest and cool down. You don't have to run at any particular capacity. Minimal and still is the correct setting. The system knows exactly what it's doing. Trust it. Safe mode also gives you permission to stop apologizing for running at reduced capacity. Most people feel they owe the world a full-performance version of themselves at all times, and experience the legitimate operation of their own protection protocols as a failure. It isn't. The system that reduced your load is the same system that keeps you running at all. It doesn't reduce your load carelessly. It reduces it when the alternative is permanent damage. Trusting the reduction is trusting the system's assessment of what you can safely carry. Side characters promoted to main characters mid-story. On the quiet periphery of your life years ago, a face in the background of group photos, a name mentioned occasionally by people you knew, someone who occupied the edge of your social map without ever stepping toward the center of it. You knew they existed. They didn't particularly register. And then something shifted. Circumstances changed in a way you couldn't have predicted. And suddenly they were essential. The person you called first. The one whose absence from a day made the day feel wrong. Someone you couldn't now imagine the story without. The simulation promotes existing assets rather than generating new ones. To keep your narrative fresh without overwhelming the server with entirely new character models, the system takes background characters already loaded into your local environment and upgrades their code at the appropriate moment. It unlocks the deeper dialogue tree that was always there. It reveals the backstory that, it turns out, complements yours with a precision that would be suspicious if you thought about it too carefully. It integrates them into your main storyline at the moment the script calls for it. They didn't change into different people. The system revealed what was always in them, waiting for the right cue. The world around you right now is full of people running deeper code than they've shown you. The quiet neighbor you've never had a real conversation with. The acquaintance you've known for years without ever going past the surface level. The stranger you see regularly in the same places. The threads connecting your lives may already be woven, the script already written, the upgrade already coded and waiting for the trigger that will fire it. Tonight the casting is set. The current chapter is running with its current cast, and no new promotions are scheduled for the dark hours. Rest in the simple cast of this moment, knowing the next important one will announce itself when the script is ready, and not before. The existing cast also contains more depth than you've accessed. The people already in your main storyline have code you haven't reached yet. The conversations that felt complete may have more available inside them. The relationships you take for granted may be running dialogue trees you've never triggered. Familiarity doesn't mean you've exhausted what's there. It usually means you've stopped looking. There's more in the people you already have than you've found yet. When the promotion happens, it always feels in retrospect like it should have been obvious. The signals were there. The conversations were different in a way you noticed but didn't interpret. The proximity was unusual but you hadn't asked why. And then the trigger fires and something unlocks and you look back at all of it and see that it was pointing toward this the whole time. That feeling of retrospective inevitability is the system's signature. The upgrade was scripted. The timing was the only variable. Invisible walls where the map quietly ends. Every possible angle tried, every amount of effort applied, the door stayed closed, not because you lacked the capability the situation seemed to require, and not because you failed to try hard enough or think clearly enough. Because something, with no logical explanation available to you at the time, pushed gently but firmly against every attempt. You could feel the resistance. It wasn't the usual kind of resistance. It wasn't the resistance of a challenge that could be overcome. It was the resistance of something that simply would not open. Open-world games establish invisible boundaries to prevent players from wandering into space that hasn't been built yet. Not physical walls they can see and examine. Collision boundaries. Walk into one and your character simply stops moving forward, sliding along the edge of the barrier. You can push as hard as you want. The map ends there. Nothing exists past that point. Nothing has been built on the other side because your story doesn't go there. Some of the dead ends in your life were the system keeping you from the void. Not punishment, not a judgment of your worthiness. The structural edges of a map that was built for your specific journey, running along the boundary of territory that was never meant for your character. When a direction closes off completely despite everything you brought to it, the simulation is communicating something concrete. The territory past this boundary hasn't been built for you. There's nothing there. Turn back and find the paths that were actually prepared for your particular feat, because those paths have ground under them. The resistance you hit was not evidence of your limits. It was evidence of a boundary, and the boundary was there for a reason that you couldn't see from the inside. Stop pressing against what wouldn't open today. Let the walls do their work. They've kept you safe and guided you back here to a room with solid ground and breathable air. You are exactly where your map intended. The edges are far from here. Rest well within them. The walls also define the territory that has been built for you, which is the more important thing they communicate. The map they bound is yours. The paths within it were prepared for your particular feat. The encounters scripted inside those boundaries were scripted for your specific consciousness. What's inside the walls is not a consolation prize for not being able to go further. It's the actual thing, the actual world built for the actual player. The walls are the edge of your map, not the edge of what's possible for you. When the loop glitches and you see the mechanism, a late-night commuter train, the rhythmic clacking of wheels on tracks steady as a heartbeat. Across the aisle, a passenger sits completely still, staring at the dark window. Several minutes pass and they don't move. Don't shift their weight. Don't do the continuous microadjustments of position and posture that living bodies make constantly, automatically, without awareness. Then they blink, but the blink is a fraction of a second too slow. When they turn their head toward the door, the motion is too smooth, too linear. Missing the small, organic corrections of a body navigating its own weight through space. For a moment, you've caught the loop hiccuping. The fidelity dropped below the threshold of convincing, and you saw through to the mechanism. The background character animations require significant processing resources to maintain at full fidelity across an entire populated environment. Under high load or during brief processing bottlenecks, the fidelity drops for an instant. The rendering remains, the realistic clothing and the familiar human shape, but the illusion of complete presence behind it flickers. You've caught a glitch not in the quality of the world, but in its maintenance. The seam showed for a moment before closing. And here's what makes this worth sitting with instead of letting it unsettle you. Every well-built thing has a structure underneath it. The structure doesn't diminish the surface. It explains it. When you catch a moment of mechanism beneath the appearance of reality, you're not seeing through a deception. You're seeing the workmanship. The seams that reveal how something is held together, what it's made of, what kind of care went into its construction. The world is built. The building is intricate and continuous and impressively maintained. The fact that it occasionally shows a seam doesn't make it less real. It makes it more astonishing that something this complex holds together at all. Let that be wonder rather than unease. Rest inside something that has been built with that kind of care. The seam also tells you something about the relationship between reality and attention. The glitch was only visible because you were looking at the right place at the right moment with a particular quality of attention. The same world seen with distracted or ordinary attention would have shown you nothing. The fact that you notice the mechanism is a function of how you look, not just of what's there. The world reveals its structure to the attention that looks for it. This is a form of invitation. The world also reveals its structure most clearly at the edges of normal function, not in the center of a busy day when everything is running smoothly and the rendering is perfect. At the margins, in the quiet hours, in the moments of distraction when the attention catches something the normal filter would have dismissed. This is worth knowing. The hours when you feel most disconnected from the ordinary world are the hours when the world's actual structure is most visible. You're not outside reality in those moments. You're looking at it from an angle that shows the seams. The code that decides what you're allowed to remember. You walked into a room with a clear and specific purpose. You stopped at the threshold and found your mind completely blank. The thought that sent you there was gone. You stood looking at the ordinary furniture and objects, unable to retrieve what you came for. Then you stepped back through the doorway into the previous room, and the memory returned immediately, fully intact, as though it had been waiting just outside. Access permissions, enforced by sector. Your memory is not an isolated storage device operating independently inside your skull. It's a terminal connected to a distributed system, and the system enforces strict rules about which files you can access from which locations. Different environments unlock different directories. When you cross a threshold into a new space, your active memory files are cached, and certain archives are temporarily locked to prioritize rendering the new environment and loading its associated information. The forgotten purpose wasn't erased. It was stored in the previous sector's directory, unavailable until you returned to the correct coordinates. The doorway itself was the trigger for a file access rule. This same logic applies to everything you're trying to hold tonight. The schedule, the obligations, the things you must not forget, the conversations you need to replay and assess. All of it is in directories that close when you enter the sleep sector. The system is not deleting your data. It's locking it into read-only storage where it cannot clutter the processes that run during rest. The information is preserved completely. The access has been appropriately restricted for this particular hour. Everything you need will be available again in the morning, when you step back into the sector where those files belong. You don't need to remember anything right now. You are literally in the wrong sector for those files to be open. Trying to hold them here is working against the system's correct, appropriate design. Log out of the directory. Let the local cache clear. The archive is keeping everything safe until morning. The design intelligence here is worth sitting with. The system didn't build a single universal memory that everyone accesses from anywhere. It built location-specific access rules that change what's available depending on where you are. This is not a limitation. It's appropriate architecture. Some information belongs to the morning. Some belongs to the dream state. Some belongs to the moments of action. The system knows which belongs where better than your conscious preferences do. Trust the access rules. The architecture also protects you from yourself in a specific way. If you had full access to every memory file at all times, the weight of the complete archive would be crushing. The access restrictions mean you only carry what's relevant to where you currently are. You don't have to hold your entire history in active memory at once. The system decides what's contextually appropriate and loads accordingly. The forgetting is the feature, not the flaw. Hidden achievements you unlock without knowing. Walking along a path in a local park, an ordinary afternoon, nobody watching and no particular destination. A small insect struggles on its back in the gravel, wings moving uselessly against the air. Without consciously deciding to, you lean down, nudge it onto a leaf and set it safely in the grass beside the path. You straighten up and continue walking. No audience, no record, no one to know it happened or to credit you for it afterward. The simulation logged it. Games track hidden achievements constantly, measuring metrics so specific and unexpected that discovering them surprises even experienced players. Choices made when no external reward was visible. Kindness extended to characters who can't offer anything in return. Patience sustained through sequences that offered no obvious payoff. The unlock happens whether or not the player was aware they were being evaluated. The criteria are kept invisible specifically, because the goal is to observe what the player does when they don't think performance is being measured. Your real score doesn't look like any external measure you've ever been evaluated by. The system is maintaining a ledger of things that have no currency in the visible world. The moments of patience when patience cost you something real. The times you chose to be kind when you were already running below empty. The nights you held yourself together through a wave that had no reason to not break you. The small, private acts of grace that no one witnessed and that you didn't perform for any audience. Each of these has been flagged. The progress has been recorded. The achievements exist in the permanent record, whether or not you've been notified of them. And simply choosing to rest tonight, clearly and without drama, choosing to let the day close and stop managing and stop performing, is registering as one of the more significant completions in the categories that matter most. The level is done. The record is accurate. The achievements are real. The hidden metrics also track patterns rather than just individual acts, not just the single moment of kindness, but the tendency toward kindness under pressure. Not just one night of choosing to rest instead of managing, but the gradual development of the ability to stop. What the system is building a record of is not a highlight reel. It's a character profile, the complete picture of who you are when nobody is evaluating you. That profile is more honest and more complete than any external evaluation you've ever received. The profile also captures the moments you wouldn't think to count, the way you've kept showing up for things that don't reward showing up, the patience you've extended to people who couldn't see it, the private standards you've maintained when lowering them would have been easier and cost you nothing visible. These are in the record. They always were. The hidden metrics were always watching these things most carefully. Your life as a test build, not the final release. The imperfections are frustrating when you hold them against some imagined standard of what a finished life should look like. The minor annoyances that accumulate into days, the ways the body doesn't quite perform as specified, the messiness of relationships that never achieve the clean, resolved state that other people's lives seem to maintain from the outside. We press ourselves hard to make life look like a finished product and feel a persistent, low-grade disappointment when it keeps not quite arriving there. It was never the final release. It was always a test build, and test builds are not supposed to be finished. Before a program ships to the public, it exists as a beta, an environment explicitly designed to be experimental, incomplete, and populated with unresolved issues. Not because the developers are incompetent, because this is the phase where everything important gets discovered, the interactions that weren't anticipated, the edge cases that only emerge under real conditions, the unexpected behaviors that reveal something true about how the system actually works versus how it was theorized to work in controlled environments. The test build exists so that consciousness can try things, fail safely, and learn without permanent stakes attached to every mistake. You are allowed to have bugs. Your relationships are allowed to be rough drafts. Your career is allowed to have unfinished branches. Your body is allowed to run on experimental settings that don't fully stabilize. The errors and glitches of your life are not evidence of failure. They're the natural and appropriate properties of a work in progress, and this particular work in progress is genuinely progressing. The developers are not expecting a perfect run from you. They want you to explore the mechanics, encounter the edge cases, learn what the system can do under real conditions. The bugs you find by living through your specific life are exactly the information the test build was designed to generate. Today's session is over. The console is closed. The tired avatar can go limp now. The beta environment has been suspended for the night. Beta environments also generate the most interesting data when the player stops trying to perform well and simply plays. The attempts at optimal performance produce predictable results. The authentic, imperfect, fully felt experience of someone simply living their life produces information that no controlled test could replicate. Your life in beta is more valuable to the development of whatever this is precisely because you lived it genuinely rather than correctly. The bugs you generated by being real were the point. When the simulation downgrades graphics to save resources. Watch the world outside as evening settles in. The sharp colors of the afternoon bleed slowly away. The crisp, defined edges of buildings and trees soften and blur. The vivid, high-contrast world of the day, where everything has clear definition and strong shadow and particular saturated color, dissolves into something gentler and grayer and simpler. The world doesn't get less real as the light fades. It gets lower resolution. The rendering quality drops, and something in you relaxes in response. When preparing for a period of low player activity, the simulation automatically reduces its graphical load. Distant textures simplify to their base forms. Light reflection models drop from their most demanding calculations to more basic settings. The computationally expensive visual processing that makes the day world so sharp and navigable scales back, so the core servers can focus on the background work that happens when the active observers are offline. The soft focus quality of evening hours is not a failure of perception or a limit of your eyes. It's intelligent resource management. The universe is telling you something through the quality of the light. The high-definition demands of the day are complete. You don't need to process sharp details or navigate high-contrast situations anymore tonight. You don't need to run the complex visual analysis of your environment that the day requires, or track the fine texture of every social exchange, or maintain the vigilance that makes the day world navigable. The engine has lowered the resolution of your world, wrapped everything in a softer focus, and is asking very little of your processing capacity at this hour. Let your own inner focus mirror this external downgrade. Let your thoughts find the blurry, simplified shapes of a darkened room. Stop trying to maintain the day's resolution on anything at all. The sharp edges of your worries are softening on their own because the engine has stopped rendering them at full complexity, and nobody is requesting the high-resolution version anymore. The world is running on its minimal, most restful settings. Join it there completely. The specific thing the downgrade does to your worries is worth nomming. At full resolution, a worry has sharp edges, fine detail, and clear definition. It has subcomponents and implications and cascading consequences all rendered in high contrast. At low resolution, those details simplify. The sharp edges soften. The subcomponents blur into the background. The worry is still there but running at a level of complexity that matches the processing resources available at this hour, which are minimal. The evening is not the right environment for high-resolution worry. The settings don't support it. Branching timelines running in the background. A choice that seemed small but left a quiet echo. Unprompted sometimes, a vivid flash of the other version. The life that would have unfolded if you'd said yes instead of no, or taken the other offer, or stayed instead of going, or gone instead of staying. Not quite sadness when it arrives. More like picking up a signal from somewhere very close to where you're standing, just slightly to the left of this moment. The simulation doesn't delete the paths you didn't take. It runs them on background threads, at low resource levels, in sectors of the server that your primary consciousness doesn't have access to. Your chosen timeline receives full processing power and your complete conscious attention. The alternatives remain active in the background. They're still generating outcomes, still playing out their variations, still running the other version of your story on a thread that operates independently of yours. The flash of vivid alternative you occasionally experience, unprompted, for no reason you can identify, is crosstalk. Your primary thread briefly picking up a signal from a background thread running on the same server infrastructure, close enough that the signal leaks through. The lives you didn't choose are being lived by someone who is exactly the right person for that path, carrying exactly the right configuration of history and capability for what that path requires. You don't have to grieve the roads you didn't take. They are active and tended. They don't need your attention or your regret or your wondering to keep running. Your responsibility is to this thread, this specific story, this particular evening. The branching timelines will continue whether or not you spend tonight's energy wondering about them. Pull your attention back to this branch, this room, this single actual moment. Let the background thread spin without you. All versions are being held. This one needs you to rest. The crosstalk also stops when you sleep. The background threads continue running, but the primary thread is offline and no longer receiving their signals. The quiet of sleep is partly the quiet of a consciousness that has stopped picking up interference from its own alternatives. The what-ifs go silent not because the alternatives have stopped running, but because the primary thread has stopped listening for them. Sleep is the most complete relief from the weight of your own road not taken that exists. The timelines also don't carry each other's regrets. The version of you who took the other road is not spending its energy wondering about this one. Each thread runs its own story with full investment. The cross-thread wondering, the what, if that consumes energy in this thread, is a one-way transmission. The other versions are too busy living their own chapters to wonder about yours. You can match that. You can be too busy resting to wonder about theirs. Copies of you running on different settings. A capacity you've sensed but never quite been able to access. A deep, inexplicable connection to a skill you've never developed, a language you've never learned, a quieter or braver or more patient version of yourself that appears in certain dreams fully formed and then dissolves when you wake. You know something is there. You can feel the outline of it. You just can't reach it from your current configuration. Complex simulations run multiple instances of the same core template simultaneously with varied parameters. One instance of your template might be configured for high creativity and low risk tolerance, another for high structure and low spontaneity, a third for the particular combination of resilience and sensitivity that would be genuinely useful in a different kind of life than the one you're navigating now. Same fundamental awareness underneath all the variation. Same essential character, expressing itself across different settings for different purposes. The system does this to develop the full range of what the template is capable of, expressed across different contexts simultaneously. The capacity you sense but can't access is being expressed by another instance, running on the configuration that allows for it. The traits that feel absent from your current build are not missing from the template. They're being developed by the instance that needs them for the journey that instance is on. You are not incomplete. You are one specific expression of something fully expressed elsewhere, configured for exactly this level with exactly the traits this level requires. The pressure to be everything at once, every possible version of yourself simultaneously available and accessible, dissolves when you see the structure. You were configured for this path. The traits that feel missing are elsewhere doing their work. You are exactly what this particular life requires, which is the right amount to be for where you actually are. Accept your current configuration tonight. It's the right one for this level. The configuration you're running is also the one that produced everything you value about your own experience. The sensitivity that makes difficult things hard also makes beautiful things genuinely moving. The ambition that creates pressure also creates the capacity for real accomplishment. The empathy that produces exhaustion also produces the connections that matter most. The settings are a package. You don't get to selectively adjust individual variables without affecting the whole. What you have is a coherent configuration, and coherent configurations are rare. The fit between configuration and level also means that the things that feel like weaknesses in the context of someone else's life are not weaknesses in yours. The traits that seem to make certain paths harder are the same traits that make your particular path navigable in ways someone else's configuration couldn't manage. The template was not assigned randomly and then left to cope with whatever situation arose. The situation and the template were matched. The friction you feel against paths that don't suit you is the system telling you something accurate about the fit. Reality as a multiplayer server with invisible moderators. Those moments when you were genuinely about to make a destructive choice and something intervened. A perfectly timed phone call that arrived at the exact wrong moment to stop you. A stranger who said the one thing that redirected you before you did something you couldn't undo. A door that didn't open when you pushed it, sending you down a different corridor that turned out to matter. Interventions that made no logical sense unless something was paying attention and had the capacity to adjust the immediate environment. Open-world multiplayer games would collapse into chaos without moderation. Developers place administrators throughout the server, most of them invisible, monitoring the health of the environment, correcting toxic loops before they propagate, repairing broken assets, quietly redirecting players who have wandered toward edges that have no ground under them. The moderators don't announce themselves. They work within the natural mechanics of the world, and their interventions look exactly like coincidence from inside the game. The player experiences a lucky break. The moderator simply did their job. The evidence that you have been protected is that you are here. Not everything that's happened to you has been good. Not everything has been fair or easy or what you would have chosen. The moderation system doesn't filter out difficulty or remove every obstacle. It maintains the structural integrity of the game. It keeps the map from collapsing. It ensures that your particular story has enough ground under it to keep going. The times you were caught, redirected, given an unexpected exit from a situation that was closing in, those were the moderators doing the work they were placed there to do. You can step out of your active defensive role tonight. You don't have to guard your own perimeter or monitor your own safety. The server is being watched. The structural integrity of this space, this night, this sector of the map, is being maintained by something other than your vigilance. Let down the guard completely. The moderation team is on duty. You're allowed to sleep. The moderation team's most important work happens when the players are offline. When the conscious minds are no longer active in the environment, the administrators have access to the underlying code that the live game prevents them from touching. The repairs that couldn't be made during active play become possible during downtime. The deeper adjustments, the ones that require the environment to be quiet enough to work in, happen now. This is another reason the night is more active than it appears. The most important maintenance runs when you're not watching. The day your character model stops matching who you are. A mirror in a moment of unfamiliar recognition. The shape in the glass feels slightly provisional, slightly too small or too fixed to contain the vast, fluid awareness looking out through it. For a moment the body feels like it belongs to an earlier version of you, a past configuration that the system hasn't yet updated to reflect what's happened since. You've grown past it in ways the rendering hasn't caught up to. The inside has leveled up. The outside is still displaying the previous version. Your consciousness develops faster than your character model updates. As you progress through the simulation, the awareness operating inside you expands and integrates and transforms at a rate the dense, slow medium of physical matter cannot match. The character model, the body running in biological hardware, takes considerably longer to reflect internal changes. The moments of disconnection between your outer form and your inner sense of yourself are a natural and expected desynchronization. Your software has leveled up. The hardware is displaying the previous version. The update is in progress. It's just not finished yet. This is not a malfunction. It's a sign the update is actually running. The system is working on the next version of your character model while you sleep, running the background processes that bring the rendering closer to who you actually are now. The work is real. The progress is real. You just can't see the progress bar. Tonight, let your consciousness uncouple from the specific constraints of the current model. Release the requirement of maintaining a particular shape or weight or set of physical capabilities. Let the edges of the body soften in the dark, and let yourself be, for these hours, the awareness itself, formless, unlocated at rest. The avatar will be realigned and restored by morning. The update will run while you sleep. For now, just be the thing doing the experiencing, not the vessel doing the experiencing in. The update also runs in one direction only. The character model is always trying to catch up to the consciousness inside it, not the other way around. The awareness leads. The form follows. This means that what you've become on the inside is always slightly ahead of what you look like from the outside, which means the outside version of you that you see in mirrors and photographs is always slightly behind the actual current version. You are already further along than you appear to yourself. The model just hasn't caught up yet. This also means the character model visible to others is not the current version of you either. They're seeing the rendering, which is behind the awareness. Everyone is seeing an older version of everyone else. The person you think you're known as is not the person you currently are. And the person who seems stuck or unchanged in someone else's view is running an update they can't yet see. Give yourself and everyone else the grace of knowing the rendering is always slightly behind. When the story railroads you back onto the main plot, you planned a complete departure, a break from the work, the relationships, the entire established landscape of who you'd been. The freedom of the decision felt real and significant, and then something started pulling. Old connections resurfaced without explanation or invitation. Opportunities appeared in the field you thought you'd left. A persistent drawback toward the themes and questions and people you were trying to put behind you. The harder you tried to leave, the more elaborate and insistent the return became. When a player wanders too far from the intended arc of the story, the simulation steers them back without locking them down. It uses the environment to do it, a conversation that lands with unexpected weight, an offer from an unexpected direction, a sequence of events that only makes logical sense if something was organizing them toward a particular outcome. The system doesn't override your will. It doesn't force you back by closing options or building walls. It makes the return feel natural. It makes the inevitable look like choice. And by the time you're back on the main path, it feels less like being redirected and more like finally stopping the resistance to something that was always going to be true about your life. Your main story is more resilient than your capacity to leave it permanently. You cannot escape what is essentially yours. You can detour for a long time. The system allows extensive wandering before it begins nudging you back. But the arc is there. The destination is encoded. Whatever is most genuinely yours is waiting at coordinates your story cannot permanently bypass, because those coordinates are written into the foundation of what you are rather than into any particular external structure. Stop fighting the direction of your own life tonight. Trust the current. The narrative is being held by something that knows it better than you can see it from inside this chapter. Let it carry you. The resilience of the main arc also means that the detours have been built into the timeline from the beginning. The wandering was not deviation. It was included. The system that wrote your arc knew you would take the long way around certain things, and it wrote the arc long enough to accommodate that. The years you spent going the wrong direction were always going to be part of the route. The route was always going to be long enough to include them. Nothing was wasted. Nothing actually took you off course. The course was always this: the idle animation that shows your default state. What does your avatar do when nothing is required of it? In games, idle animations reveal something that game designers rarely discuss explicitly: the character's authentic baseline. When no input is given and no action is required, the character doesn't freeze into a static pose. It breathes. It shifts its weight slightly. It looks around at the environment with a specific kind of attention. It moves its hands in small, characteristic ways. These animations were designed to show who the character is when they're not performing anything in particular, when all purposeful action has been temporarily removed. The idle animation is often the truest portrait of the character. You have an idle animation too. And most people never see it clearly because they never allow the idle state to run long enough to observe it. What do you naturally do when no task requires you and no one is watching? When an unexpected hour opens up and you haven't yet filled it with anything? The first impulse, before you redirect yourself to something productive or entertaining or social, is your idle animation. The thought your mind reaches for when it hasn't been assigned a direction is your default state. The posture your body adopts when it's not being managed for any audience is your actual baseline. Most people spend considerable effort filling the idle moments immediately. The space opens, and within 30 seconds it's been repurposed for something else. The idle animation never gets to play long enough to be seen. This is the first time in a long time, possibly, that you've stayed in the idle state without immediately filling it. Your body is finding its actual resting weight. Your mind is reaching for whatever it reaches for when nobody is directing it. Your breathing is settling into whatever rhythm it settles into when performance is suspended. This is you, the authentic, unmanaged, unperforming default. Let it run. What the idle animation reveals is also what you return to most reliably when the performance ends. It's the version of you that doesn't require maintenance or intention or energy expenditure to exist. It just exists, automatically, continuously. It was running before you developed the performance, and it runs when the performance stops. The performance is the learned behavior. The idle animation is the native one. And the native one is always more sustainable than anything you have to work to maintain. The idle animation also reveals what you return to fastest under pressure, not the performance which takes setup and energy. The native behavior which activates automatically when the performance becomes impossible. Knowing your idle animation means knowing your most reliable ground. What you do when everything else stops is what you can always do. That's the foundation. It was always the foundation. Tonight you're resting in it. The sleep state as a deep defragmentation. By evening, the mind feels like a desk that has accumulated the entire day without being cleared. Half-finished thoughts sitting in unsorted piles. The emotional residue of 3 different conversations, each one still vibrating at its own frequency, none of them fully resolved. A task started and interrupted twice, still waiting with its loose ends trailing. A concern that arrived at noon and has been circling ever since, not resolved and not released, just orbiting. The data is scattered across different sectors, and retrieving any single piece takes more energy than it should. This is exactly what the defragmentation utility was designed to address. When a hard drive runs long enough without maintenance, the files it contains fragment. Pieces of the same information end up scattered across different physical sectors of the disk. The system has to work harder and run hotter to assemble what it needs, pulling scattered pieces from multiple locations every time it tries to access a file. Defragmentation reorganizes everything, picks up the scattered pieces, arranges them into clean, continuous blocks, clears the empty space left by deleted files that were still technically occupying room. Your mind undergoes exactly this process during sleep, automatically, without requiring you to initiate or supervise it. You don't have to organize today before you close your eyes. You don't have to file away the experiences, process the emotions into tidy conclusions, or resolve any of the open threads before rest is permitted. The defragmentation protocol handles all of this while you're away. The moment you genuinely let go and slide into sleep, the utility takes over. It sorts through the data of the day with efficiency that your conscious mind cannot match. It places what belongs in long-term archives. It releases what doesn't need to be held. It cools the processor and clears the working memory. Give the system permission to begin. Let go of the controls. The defragmentation is already cueing itself. The maintenance cycle was waiting for your attention to step aside. Trust it and drift away from the desk. The files will be organized by morning. The system will run faster and more clearly when you wake. All it needed was your absence from the process. The defragmentation also organizes in terms of what's actually important rather than what felt urgent. The urgency of the day's tasks creates a false hierarchy in the moment. Whatever demanded your attention most forcefully got filed as most significant. The defragmentation reorders on a different principle, placing what genuinely matters in accessible locations and archiving what was only urgent rather than important. The hierarchy you wake up with is more accurate than the one you went asleep with. The maintenance has better judgment than the urgency did. Cozy dev rooms and sandbox dreams. A dream where you flew effortlessly over dark water, the ocean below you moving in slow, enormous swells under a sky crowded with stars, the wind carrying you without effort and without weight. Or a dream where you sat in a warm room that was somehow both the kitchen of your childhood and a place you've never been, with someone you love who has been gone for years. talking about nothing important. The way you used to before the loss made that kind of ordinary conversation impossible. Or a dream where you built something with your hands that was impossible and perfect and completely real for as long as the dream held. In those experiences, the rigid physics of the waking world simply dissolve. Gravity becomes optional. Time loses its direction and its urgency. The heavy, insistent rules that govern every waking moment, the ones that make certain things impossible and certain losses permanent, soften and then disappear entirely. In game development, private offline test environments are called dev rooms or sandbox levels, and they're among the most important spaces in the development process. In these spaces, the standard rules are switched off completely. Collision detection disabled. Physics suspended. No consequences, no performance metrics, no enemies, no objectives. Developers use these rooms to play without stakes, to experiment without cost, to rest inside the world they've been building under the pressure of live conditions. Your dreams are your private dev room. When you sleep, your consciousness steps into a protected space where the physical engine is paused and the rules of the day cannot follow you in. Where you can fly, where you can see the people you've missed, where impossible things work because the system enforcing impossibility has been switched off, where you can move through space and time without the constraints that make the waking world navigable but also limiting. The live game is going offline now. The physics engine is being suspended. Your private dev room is waiting, warm and unstructured and completely safe. Step across the threshold. None of today's rules follow you here. The dev room is also where the system tests what you're capable of outside the normal constraints. Dreams that show you versions of yourself you don't recognize in waking life. The brave one, the creative one, the one who speaks freely, are not fantasies. They're the parallel processor running your template on different settings in a safe environment, showing you what the configuration can do, showing you what's in the template that the current level's constraints haven't let through. The dev room knows your full range, even when the live game doesn't. Syncing with the universal frame rate. The ticking of a clock in a quiet room, the rhythmic sound of rain against glass, the slow, steady pulse of your own heartbeat when you hold still enough to feel it clearly. When you listen to these rhythms without trying to do anything with them, something in your body responds automatically. Shoulders lower without deciding to lower. The chest opens slightly. The mind stops generating forward motion and simply exists, for a moment, in the present without reaching past it. Every simulation runs on a master clock cycle, a base tick rate that determines how quickly the system processes and updates its state. When we're awake and operating under pressure, our minds run at high-frequency processing speeds, generating responses to stimuli, planning forward, reacting to threats real and imagined, turning over information rapidly. These frequencies are essential for navigating the complexity of the day. But they're not synchronized with the deeper, slower rhythm of the underlying server. The conscious mind runs fast. The world beneath the world runs slow. Sleep is the process of stepping your local processor down, gradually reducing the clock speed until your personal frequency matches the quiet master tick rate of the world beneath the world. Not a loss of consciousness, a synchronization, the frantic surface frequency finding its way down to the baseline that was always running underneath it. Your breathing is how the synchronization actually happens, not as a technique to perform, not as something to manage or control or do correctly, as the thing that is already happening, automatically, at the rate your body knows to choose when the conscious mind steps back. Each slow exhale reduces the local frequency a little further. Each pause between breaths is where the alignment deepens. You're moving down through the registers of experience, from the sharp and rapid to something longer and older and calmer. The earth beneath you is running at that frequency. The air in this room is running at it. Breathe in, breathe out. In the pause between, the systems find each other. The synchronization is also cumulative. The first breath in the direction of rest doesn't complete the sync, but each subsequent breath, Each exhale that goes a little slower than the one before steps the local frequency down incrementally toward the baseline. This is not a technique that requires effort. It's a direction you can lean into and then allow. The lean is your part. The gravity that pulls you toward the baseline is the system's part, and the system's gravity at this hour is very strong. The credits roll at the end of the day. You've seen it at the end of a genuinely moving film. The final scene fades slowly to black. The closing credits begin to roll. The music is soft and unhurried and doing something different than the music during the film. The theater is still. You sit in the warm dark and breathe, not quite ready to stand up and rejoin the world, letting the journey you just took settle into you. The story is complete. The screen is dark. There's nothing left to do except let what happened actually land. Every day is its own episode, complete with its own opening, its own rising action, its complications and its small resolutions and its threads that remain unfinished. When the light goes low and the quiet arrives, the episode is over. The credits are rolling right now, quietly presenting the names of everyone who appeared in today's story, the decisions that shaped an hour, the moments you didn't notice at the time that were part of the texture of what actually happened. The music underneath is the sound of your own breathing slowing down. You don't have to start writing tomorrow's episode tonight. Don't edit today's scenes. Don't worry about the threads that will still be there when you wake. Don't replay the parts you do differently or try to resolve the tension that carried over from the previous episode. The episode of today is finished, locked, being archived right now, exactly as it was, with all of its imperfections and all of its small, unrepeatable moments. Whatever happened in it, the things you handled well and the things you didn't, the moments you were exactly who you wanted to be and the moments you fell short, all of it is now part of a complete record that doesn't need your ongoing attention or revision to be preserved correctly. The screen is getting darker. The music is fading under the last few names in the credits. The system is acknowledging your journey through today in the only way systems can, by recording that it happened, that you were in it, that it was real and it counted. You played your part. You made it to the end of another episode, which is not a small thing. It is, actually, everything it needed to be. Let the lights go all the way out now. Let the silence wrap around you completely. Step into the soft black between this episode and the next and let yourself rest. The credits say you've earned it. They're right. 50 theories. None of them asked you to be certain about anything. All they asked was this: consider the possibility, just for tonight, that the world you're living in is stranger and more carefully designed than it usually presents itself as being. That the hard seasons were difficulty settings, calibrated and purposeful. That the loading screens were building something. That the glitches were proof of repair rather than failure. That what you can't see from where you're standing is simply unrendered, not absent. That you've been watched over by something that tracks your exhaustion even when you've stopped tracking it yourself. That the encounters that mattered were scripted. That the things that couldn't be opened weren't meant to be opened by you. The simulation, if it exists, is not indifferent to you. It rendered this room. It maintains the physics keeping you in your bed. It cleared the map so you could rest tonight. It has been updating your memories while you slept and preparing the next scene while you were busy in the current one. It has been running your story with more care than you've been giving it credit for. Whatever it is out there that makes everything work, the physics, the randomness, the extraordinary improbability of this particular awareness finding this particular quiet on this particular night, it is not asking anything of you right now. Just this, just the breath, just the dark. Sleep now, somewhere inside a universe that, in at least one of these 50 strange ideas, was always going to take care of you.